Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positive. Happy opening week to everyone. Happy Labor Day, post Labor Day, leftover Labor Day. Send the kids back to school day. That happened last week, but sending me back to the Maryland Crab Cake Tour next week. We're going to be at the Beaumont on the 16th. All of it brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I'll have some pressure lucks and lucky sevens. I only have a handful of these left. I will have Ravens scratch off on the 16th when I get over to Catonsville. Big thanks to our newest sponsors at GBMC. If you're out there checking that out, some information about obesity and weight loss. I've had people using Ozempics. I've learned some things about that this week. And just a lot of visiting with my friends up in Buffalo this week, whether it's John Warrow from the Associated Press telling him how the guitarists and replacements tried to steal my girlfriend at Hammerjacks back in the 80s, or whether it's John McClain talking about the league in Houston and DeAndre Hopkins and also Clark Judge and some others. So great coverage here this week, but nothing better than our own Luke Jones, who's been out in Owings Mills monitoring. I don't know, man. No injury report this or worry last week that. It's all next week that, and how are we going to feel on Monday morning? But certainly the biggest news that happened through the holiday. And it might have gotten buried a little bit because it happened at the end of the week and the Orioles and this and that, and people are kind of going away, was the Kyle Hamilton thing. And you had said, and by the way, if you're on the WNST tech service, you get it first. It's all brought to you by Cole Roofing and Gordian Energy. We do that. We've been doing that longer and better than anybody, almost 2 decades into that. To figure out exactly when we started that. We're right up on about 20 years. So we want to celebrate that with Bill Cole. But we give $100 million, and some fans say, "Well, so this is gonna be educational today. We'll do football 101 today." And for a lot of people, and say, why him? Why the money? Why he's a safety? Remember Brian Billick saying, Ed Reed, Ed, you're a safety. You're still a safety. I would say this isn't shocking to you and me, people that really know the game and watch the game. You're a guy that has, from much like you felt that way about Rutschman a couple years ago, so he's the best player on the field right now. At the time, Kyle Hamilton kind of came into that seat pretty quickly, and we weren't talking as much Roquan, and Marlon Humphrey was what he was, and Matabike is going to get his money, but he's not the versatility and the kind of, X factor player. And in the aftermath of this Micah Parsons nonsense that went on with the Cowboys and Green Bay, letting a really good player leave and not being able to define what Peter Boulware couldn't do to become this kind of player in a different kind of era with a different kind of body style versus how impactful Ray Lewis was a generation ago and may or may not be based on how they play the game these days, certainly the aggression. Kyle Hamilton is the right player in the right place at the right time in the right franchise, being used maybe in the right way to be as valuable as the contract. But I would ask you, because you're the football head around here, and what do we know about football? We just cover professionally better than anybody. What makes Kyle Hamilton the guy if you're explaining it to, I don't know, let's say your sister didn't know as much about football and said, hey, why did they give him all that money? I understood Ray Lewis. I understand Ed Reed. Why is Kyle Hamilton a generational Mount Rushmore kind of player?
Well, because I think when you look at a roster and you obviously see a player's position, you see a capital S for him, being a safety. It's more than a safety. And we've been talking about that for a couple years now. Now, early on, and we even talked about this in our previous segment, when you're talking about a rookie safety, like Malachi Starks is about to make his NFL debut, there could be some hiccups, and there were with Kyle Hamilton. And we saw the Ravens, mainly because they didn't necessarily need him to take his lumps as a deep safety at that point in time. They put him at the nickel. Now, that was almost more out of need and what was best for him as a rookie. But since then, we've just seen him take off. He has the makeup. He's smart. He's a freak physically. When you look at how big he is, how he hits, how he runs. He is everything. And to go back to what I said, he's not just a safety. He is in that breed that you would just say, and this sounds a little bit coach speaky, but he's a football player. And more specifically, he's a heck of a defensive football player. And the thing about Kyle Hamilton is he can make an impact at every level of the defense, and we've seen that. We've seen him play nickel. We've seen him rush off the edge, as a blitzer and be really good doing that.
Well, he doesn't think of himself
He,
as a safety, right?
yeah, right. What's funny is I think he does, but he is fully open and embraces doing whatever the defense asks of him, and more specifically, and we learned this big time the second half of last year, needs from him, where he transitioned from being this all over the field, not knowing where he was going to line up. And not to say he didn't do any of that, but that was scaled back a little bit. Why? Because Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson were killing them on the back end of the defense to the point where they said, we need you to play a little more like that, right? We need you to do that. And you and our Darius Washington are going to, we need to right the ship here. And they did that. And it's a compliment to those two, together. And it's a compliment to the coaching staff for recognizing and making a difficult decision. But it just speaks to how incredibly versatile, incredibly dynamic, how smart Kyle Hamilton is. If you talk to his teammates, how, and that taking nothing away from Roquan Smith, who is the middle linebacker, the traditional quarterback of a defense, right? In the way that Ray Lewis was for decades and, decades ago and what he did. And, you think of any great middle linebacker, what they meant, even with the position and its demands having evolved over the years. Uh, no, no disrespect meant to Marlon Humphrey or Nnamdi Madubuike or the other dynamic players on this defense, and they have a lot of them. Kyle Hamilton's my one. He's the guy that I'm taking before any of them, and I'm not thinking twice about it. That's how dynamic he is. And I started saying this last year, during his third season. You know me, man. I'm not. I really loathe the hot take element of what our business can be. And I don't say that to be personal to anyone, just in a general sense. I don't like being over the top and using hyperbole. I'm just not that way. Kyle Hamilton has every ounce of potential and ability and football smarts and makeup to be the third best defensive player. And I only say that because I'm not going to put him with Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. I just refuse to do that. But maybe in 5 or 6 years, maybe we will be talking in those terms. But the fact that I'm putting him, or I think he has the ability to be above Suggs and above Nada and every other multi-time Pro Bowl defensive player they've had, it speaks to what I think about him. And I think it speaks to why the organization, despite the fact that they had him under his final year of his rookie contract, like his standard 4-year contract as the middle of the first round pick, and they already had his 5th-year option year locked in next year. They didn't want to wait. Why wait? Because the price is only going to go up, especially knowing, once you get to closer to the CBA, more TV deals, all of that. Price always goes up. So the idea was, let's do this now. We have him locked in through 2030. We're talking about someone who's still, Kyle Hamilton's 24 years old.
Well, they get to build their defense around him now.
Sure. And that's the thing. And people will say, well, did you have to go to 25 million per year? First of all, if you kind of look at it in its totality, what he's making this year is still modest beyond the $27 million signing bonus. But what his base salary was going to be this year, kind of sort of stays in place. Same thing for next year. So really, when you kind of look at it, if you combine the 6 years, it's a little over 20 million per year AAV. But those
what I
years,
always think with these guys, they got calculators bigger than you and me at this point, and
sure.
the AI and treatments for all of this, and the Ravens are as good as anybody. Other than giving money to the wrong guy, which Earl Thomas, figure out who it is, or giving
it happens to everyone every now and then
to to Odell Beckham a couple of years ago, in overvaluing that on purpose in some way. This is a guy they think is their next Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, generational player, that they're going to win 3 championships with him and Lamar together because he's going to be the Lamar of the defense.
Yeah. You hope so. And obviously, in our previous segment, we talked about championships and how that's always tied to the quarterback. But, Kyle Hamilton was asked on Wednesday when the announcement came and he spoke to the media about an hour later or so. He was kind of asked, what's next for you in terms of individually speaking? What about your play would you like to take to the next level? And, it's a little cliche like, but He just said very matter of factly, Super Bowl. I mean, you re-sign Kyle Hamilton, you give Kyle Hamilton, you make him the highest paid safety in NFL history, and pay him not really like a safety. They paid him like a football player. And I think you and I at one point in time over the last 6 months, we talked about like valuation, like how would you? And I think I even said to you, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get 25 million because I said if I were his agent, I would say, guys, you know he's not just a safety. I mean, you know that. You don't use him like a traditional safety. So I kind of thought, to me, 25 million a year
You
sounds about
use him
right.
like a rush edge, like
I mean, you
Micah
use him.
Parsons or something like that, which gets us to the value of. I want to throw this in because this is turmoil for the Cowboys,
Oh,
right?
I
And
mean,
when I've talked about the Chargers losing their linemen, players, teams losing anchor pieces. If somehow Ronnie Stanley were just down for the year and the Ravens had to figure it out, or something happens to Kyle Hamilton,
just gonna say,
players, right? Like 25, 30, $40 million players, quarterbacks, obviously, but difference makers when Joe Burrow doesn't have a wide receiver, whatever that piece is, not the king, but the queen. How about that?
yeah.
On the chessboard, when it goes away, for the Cowboys and the mismanagement part, and I always keep going back to this because I had Mark Messina on this week, and obviously I think Mark Messina is one of the great guests I ever have on. I've known Mark 35 years. I don't know anyone more astute about sports, inside, outside. His brother, agents. He's written books. He's written like Mark's county commissioner now in your state, up in Lycoming County, up in the North County, now North State. And we talked about and he's a lifelong Cowboy fan. And I tried to express to him, having had his brother, and he was telling me stories about his brother in New York and how when something got broken there, Steinbrenner would get it done. When things got broken in Baltimore, Angelos wanted to sue the stadium authority because the Ravens didn't have the same, like literally a different kind of life. We're talking about it, and then there's Jerry Jones, who you and I went through that facility, and I still can't believe we did it. And we literally saw the locker rooms and all the things when I've covered sports my whole life and thought this is more of an art gallery. It looks like a Turkish spa than it looks like anything else. And they're not getting football decisions right. And the difference in when you lose a Kyle Hamilton as opposed to signing one. And we can bring this to the baseball team too, because it's a good week to do that. Because we're not talking any baseball this week, so I'll mingle it in and let people know how smart you are about baseball in case they're asleep during the baseball season. That Orioles signed Basayo. You're up. Oh, it's greatest thing ever. I'm like, well, if he's a major league player, most of them make $70 million, so it's not that much money. If he turns out to be Austin Hayes or Cedric Mullins and just a good player, if he turns out to be Matt Wieters, it's still
It's not gonna cripple
it's
you.
not going to cripple
Yeah.
them, right? And it's a good deal for the kid, and it's a good deal for them. And he's from the islands, like my people, and much more apt to take the money than anybody that's been Jackson Holiday growing up in a mansion, right? So
Mhm.
there is a difference in all that. We went through Joe Flacco not growing up in a mansion and still saying, I'll get paid the same anyway. Kyle Hamilton taking this deal and wanting to be here, important for the organization, him, financial stability, like all of that. Why the Cowboys can't get it done when they have all the money of God, and why they want to break that up, and what that means when you lose an X factor player, that when the Ravens say, yeah, we like our center, we like our tight end, we like our whatever, but we're going to sign this safety and give him top of market, no questions asked. We want that kid in our locker room the next 6 years. And then the Micah Parsons things happens within 24 hours, right? Like it really does speak to these franchises as to how Steve Bisciotti, and with Art Modell, by the way, I've had two parades since Jerry threw out Jimmy Johnson and I watched Barry Switzer win on the Hill. That before we had the Ravens, it's crazy. But you see the movements of these franchises, and you're like, Ravens, find a guy, draft a guy, don't even use him. I mean, Kyle Hamilton would be a safety anywhere else, right? He really would be, right?
I mean, I think there are some other good defensive coaches that I think would have moved him around, but yeah, in a lot of
But you have to have the
places,
kind of team to do that
sure,
too. And
you
if you're a
got
defensive coordinator, you have to have job
well,
security, like all of those kinds of
look at
things to be doing island. I'm going to play a different kind of defense than anybody's ever seen by using a safety from Notre Dame and running him around like Lawrence Taylor, literally, right?
well, and I think that's part of why you saw him drop because I mean some teams didn't like how he ran, right? They said he was too slow. I mean
He's a football player. I'll
and
figure out how to use him.
it's not exactly the same because Lamar was kind of an extreme example of this, but it's the same way where the Ravens said, yeah, we really like Lamar Jackson. We'll get creative. We'll do some things a little bit differently than your quote prototype quarterback, whatever that means, and we're even that's been so successful. When you say the same thing about some of these other modern quarterbacks where the idea of a prototype quarterback is evolving. You don't think of a guy anymore like in 2025, like you don't think of a starting quarterback as someone that you want to be Tom Brady in the pocket where they're not going to move and they're just a statue back there. I mean, you don't. Kyle Hamilton, and you can recall I probably started using the term positionless defense and more specifically positionless secondary with the Ravens. I mean, this might have been 7 or 8 years ago at this point in time. This was probably transitioning from Dean Pease to Wink Martindale, which was 2017 to 2018. Kyle
And Wink
Hamilton.
came from the Ryan school
Oh,
of
sure, of course,
we're going to do anything. Yeah.
And again, I don't want to say this is so cutting edge that no other teams do this because there are other really talented, good system defenses that move guys around. But when you have someone like Kyle Hamilton, who's as big as he is, as strong as he is, as fast as he is, okay, he doesn't run like a corner. I get that, but he's still plenty fast. And you do all that. Why would you? Why would you just try to restrict him to doing one thing? You want to be careful with this. And I've said to you, because he's going to be playing with Malachi Starks here early on, I'm wondering if you do see the Ravens play it a little more conventionally early on in the season. But the idea, and by the way, Malachi Starks is a guy who played a lot of nickel at Georgia last year. I think once he is more comfortable, and that might be week 8, it might be week 13, or it might be next season. I mean, you don't know. I don't want to put too much as far as expectations on a young kid. But the idea is you're going to have these two guys that you can move around like crazy. I mean, can play in the box, play in the slot, line up and blitz from the edge. I'm guessing Malachi Starks probably won't do as much of that as Hamilton, but that's what you want. So when you get a piece that is that special to what fits your philosophy and what you want to do as a defense collectively, you pay them. I mean, it's inexplicable. It's not inexplicable because I'm not surprised because you know what Jerry Jones cares about? $13 billion. The Dallas Cowboys, I think the most recent valuation I saw of the franchise was $13 billion. He cares way more about that than winning Super Bowls. It's just the truth. I mean, he'll argue otherwise. And some of this, I'll shy away from talking about his age and, how out of touch he might be or any of that. I mean, he called Micah Parsons. He was calling him Michael multiple times in the press conference. It was just kind of odd to me. But the point is with that, Jerry thinks about the brand and loves the attention, loves the drama, all of that. And don't get me wrong, Steve Bisciotti cares about how much the Ravens are worth. The Rooney family cares how much the Steelers are worth. I mean, they all care about that. I mean, they're billionaire owners. But at the same time, the Ravens recognize, and maybe Micah Parsons is the perfect example to say, we don't want to even take a chance that it gets to that point where he's entering his final year of his deal. Maybe, we had some rough negotiations with his agent. There's some hurt feelings. Like, we don't even want to go there. This guy is that dynamic. This guy is that great. We think, barring something very bizarre, is at the very least going to be a slam dunk Ring of Honor player for us, let alone talking about maybe being a Hall of Famer if he does this for another decade. So we're going to pay him. And you know what? If it kind of resets the safety market a little bit, that's okay because he's more important than, quote, just a safety for us. So I think that's how you look at that. Whereas the Cowboys, Jerry loves the drama. I don't know if you've had a chance. I would recommend it. I've started watching it. It's fascinating. But Netflix just they're doing they did a documentary on Jerry Jones, taking over the Cowboys, buying the team, firing Tom Landry, all the faux pas PR wise, but they also built a dynasty in the first half of the 90s with him and Jimmy Johnson and what they did. But I think it's very illuminating to kind of see why Jerry is the way he is. But I mean, my goodness. And not that Micah Parsons is a flawless. I mean, there have been some whispers in terms of like, is he truly all in to the degree that you'd like a player that you're paying that much money to be? I mean, I'll hear that kind of stuff, right? I mean, I suppose, but at the very least, you certainly don't wait till a week before the season to trade him, and you get 2 first round picks and a nose tackle, and those first round picks are going to be end of the first round most likely. So, I mean, my goodness, PU, how do you let something like that happen with a guy that is that dynamic? And that's where I look at
They could have gotten you a
what.
chess piece in the draft.
Sure. I mean, like multiple chess pieces in the
Yeah.
draft, and you might have been able to get a couple top 10 picks, or who
Now you
knows?
have 3, 4 football players on your team right
Yeah.
now instead of a nose tackle. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the Herschel Walker trade, but it can at least set you up in a way that's going to be way better off than what this will be for
Well, we
them.
talk about the Orioles being screwy one way or another, and what they're going to do with Rutschman this offseason and their plans. Now that they've given money to a different catcher, and and where their beliefs are, if they believe Colton Cowser is going to come out of this or not. But nobody in the sport believes Micah Parsons would be a bad piece on their team unless you don't want to pay the kid and you don't sort of the way the Orioles didn't like Machado enough to pay him, right? I mean, so we can go
Yeah.
through this, but in the NFL, in a general sense, this doesn't happen much.
No.
Happening more with the Jalen Ramseys and these guys that just want to move around and play on different teams. Who was the guy that was the Revis? Every year he's on a different island, right? I mean, like so. I get the me generation. The NBA's way more like that. But I tell you what, around here, when Tyler Linderbaum can play, they're probably going to pay him. They're going to figure out a way to pay him. And if Isaiah Likely replaces Mark Andrews, they'll figure out a way to pay him. I mean, let alone for every Pat Ricard or oddball they've had that they've kept around. But there's a reason Tucker kicked for 15 years. Of course, they didn't know anything about any of his transgressions the last 2 or 3 contracts, of course, or they would have never have done that with a guy like that. But they kept him. They didn't get to a point where this. So the Ravens never get to this point. Most good NFL teams rarely get to this point unless they have a player they just don't want, or a malcontent, or somebody doesn't want to be on the team, or the team's in the toilet. But if the team's in the toilet, it's not like the Ravens. I mean, and this is a
Uh,
weird time of the year for all that, right? Like what Hendrickson and the Bengals, these franchises that have it again and again, hold-ins, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know what the term hold-in means because it never happens here.
Well, I mean, if you recall, J.K. Dobbins did it, right? It blew up in his face, and I don't say that with any, I don't take any satisfaction in it. I mean, he tore his Achilles week 1. I mean, just as a side note, and I mentioned this, I mean, James Cook was a hold-in for the Bills. Now, I think he started practicing like August 12th, something like that. So it's not as though but that's going to be interesting to see how he plays, not just week 1, but how does he play moving forward, right? I mean, it's tough in that front, but. And look, Eric DaCosta, when he talked on Wednesday, he acknowledged when you kind of look at who's coming up. They have Linderbaum, they have Odafe Oweh, they have Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. Travis Jones is coming up. He acknowledged you're probably going to see a couple guys from that group walk on. And I'll be honest, you mentioned Linderbaum. Look, they really, really like Linderbaum. I'm not convinced they're going to give him the $20 million that someone's going to give him per year. He might be the guy that ends up walking, not because they don't like him, but because you can't pay every single guy. However, when you have someone like Kyle Hamilton, typically we talk about this in terms of quarterbacks being the paramount position because we know it's the most important position on the field, either side of the ball. But when you have someone like Kyle Hamilton, or it was Terrell Suggs, or Ray Lewis, or Ed Reed, or Joe Flacco previously, or Lamar Jackson a couple years ago, and they're going to have to work out another extension with Lamar to lower his cap figure for next year. So that's a big part of that puzzle that I just mentioned as well. But when you have those guys, you don't let them go. I mean, you just don't. And that's why what the Ravens did in contrast to what just happened with the Cowboys. I mean, it's just, and I get it. Micah Parsons is making way more money than what Kyle Hamilton got, right? I mean, we understand an edge rusher is on either side of the ball, the second most truly elite of the elite edge rushers. I'm talking about the select group of the top 5 or 6, right? They get paid as much as anyone that's not a top shelf NFL quarterback. But man, how do you let it get to that point? And that's why I commend the Ravens on saying, not taking this as, oh, we got Kyle Hamilton for 2 more years. We're fine. I mean, cheap. Even his fifth year option is going to be very affordable compared to what he's going to make. Let's just wait. Let's no. They said we got to take care of this. We want to take care of
Well, we
this. We
also
want,
like happy football players
and that's a
more
big
than
part of it.
maybe they
Sure,
did 25 years ago, where Kevin
you
Byrne would often say to me, we don't mind that they're playing pissed off and they're playing for a contract, whether it's Ed Hartwell who's going to get his money
sure,
elsewhere or whatever, that if Tyler Linderbaum's going to get his money doing this for the Packers, that he's going to bust his ass here because he's
yeah.
pissed off for greatness. And he realizes in many cases, these guys aren't dumb. They all have agents. They're like, your future's not here,
They
Bart
can't
Scott.
pay
Your
everybody, right?
future's not here, Patrick Queen, the minute that Roquan Smith came in, right? So go out there, bust your ass, keep your nose down, and maybe the Steelers will pay you. And they did in the
Yeah,
case of Patrick Queen, right?
sure. And let me be clear. I'm not saying that Linderbaum's gone after this year. Definitely. I'm just saying when I'm kind of looking at it, I'm wondering, when you look at what they're going to have to do. But the point was
It's not like
when
Mr. Rubenstein, who has an unlimited budget.
the point was when right when you look at the guys they had coming up here over this coming off season and the one after that, obviously you need to take care of Lamar more so cap wise than anything. But beyond that, you rank those guys. Kyle Hamilton was at the top. So the thought is get it done. You now have him under contractual control through 2030, right? It's 2025. He can be at ease. You love him. You love his character, that he's going to continue to play hard. This isn't going to be a guy who gets comfortable in the way that not a lot of players, but some players might. And you're going to put your head on the pillow, whether you're talking about Eric DeCosta, John Harbaugh, Zach Orr, whoever, Steve Bisciotti, and you're going to put your head on the pillow and feel really good that Kyle Hamilton's going to be on your football team the next 6 years. So it's absolutely a win for the Ravens. It's a win for Hamilton. It's a win for his agent who can say, "Hey, we reset the safety market." All
Yeah,
of
it's a
that,
win for every agent who has a safety.
no doubt. But the point, come 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, that Hamilton deal will, I think, barring something
It'll
very
smell good. Yeah.
out of the ordinary,
Oh,
they'll
I have
feel
no
great about
complaints
it.
about it. I mean,
Yeah,
believe me, we complain about contracts and this and that. I think we've done a really good job here in 30 minutes of sort of summing it all up by just showing what Dallas didn't do, what they've done, and also bring a little Oriole history here, maybe a little Oriole future in as to how much do you like Adley Rutschman? How much did I like Jonathan Scope? How much did you like Manny Machado? How much did Don Moeller like Chris Davis? You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like literally along the pathway, you can't sign them all. You can't have everybody. And we even talk about Adam Jones and Markakis back in the day, right? Or, breaking up the band and how all of this works. Well, that's where we are right now with Ronnie Stanley as we enter Buffalolandia. We'll get back to the game here just a little bit. Ronnie Stanley, Marlon Humphrey. I have beaten the band with you last week, with others this week, with all the Buffalo people we've had on, whether it's John Warrow and my NFL legends like Clark Judge, and we're going to talk some 75 Colts with Clark Judge with this reunion. I got to find Bert. Call me, Bert. Lydell, come on. Hey, diddle diddle. Give me a call up the middle. So that's going on next week. Drink some beer. 75 Colts don't mean anything to you kids, but COL. But nonetheless, we got a game, and these veteran players. It's funny you say veteran because my wife said, "How old are those Colts guys?" I'm like, "Hold on, Bruce Laird's age. Be nice to Bruce, and Stan, some of those guys. Not that old, but we got old guys on this team right now, and." I want to see I want to see thumbs up with Roquan Smith. I want to see Marlon Humphrey running around like a premier cornerback. Maybe not the best he's ever been, but pretty good. I
He
want to
was
see
really
these
good
young
last
guys
year. Yeah,
in the right space in the right time. I'm all for judging the young players and Lamar and all of that, but I want to see Derrick Henry still do it. I want to see Ronnie Stanley still do it because they really are counting on the reason these guys, Henry aside, his contract where he is very highly compensated running back, enough so that makes Chad Wiesling happy that he's a running back agent all of a sudden. But Ronnie Stanley, Marlon, they're being paid toward the top of school at this point to be top of school, and they've had the failure. I just want to see where they are in the food chain. That's all. Because I feel like I know where Lamar is. I feel like I know where Linderbaum is. I feel like the Rosengartens and some of these guys coming on. I know where Kyle Hamilton is, but I have question marks about some of their key players. And I know you have question marks about every Trenton Simpson and every Malachi Starks and
Well,
whoever's unproven, right?
I was just going to say part of the NFL roster circle of life is, yeah, you might lose a Linderbaum next offseason, or you're going to lose a Mark Andrews next offseason, or some combination of those. I mentioned those 5 or 6 guys. They're going to pay some of them. They're not going to be able to pay all. I mean, Eric DeCosta flat out said it. So that's why it's so important that you mentioned Marlon Humphrey. What does Nate Wiggins look like in year 2? Is he looking like he's an ascending guy that in a couple years you're going to be paying him? You hope you're at least having that conversation. Otherwise, then it probably wasn't the best pick.
Yeah, he
You know,
better be the better cornerback, right?
I mean, like he doesn't have to be better than Marlon this year, but you want him to be better than he was last year. And I thought he had a solid rookie
But
season.
if Marlon slips up and
You
and
want
and he doesn't step up, then you
that's
got the Orioles pitching staff.
that's when you start to have value
Yeah.
concerns in terms of like how many of these guys are we paying? How many of these guys are we walking out or letting walk out the door? And that's why it's important for Wiggins to look the part. It's really important for Malachi Starks to look the part. Owe, I mentioned I I don't think the Ravens want to marry Odafe Owe for what he ultimately is going to get from some team. That's just my gut. I haven't been told that, but
Has he been a good draft pick in your mind?
he's been fine, right? I mean, we have to understand. I mean,
Okay.
he was what, the 31st overall pick.
Yeah.
The Ravens have done so well drafting football players that if a guy doesn't become a multi-time Pro Bowl player as a
Yeah.
first round pick, they're kind of viewed. I think he's been a perfectly fine pick, not a home run, but he hasn't been Matt Elam either,
All
right? I
the
mean,
things we probably said about Markakis in the middle of it, and then we're like, man, we'd like to have
you
us a
look
Jared
back and say,
Johnson.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Give,
some
give,
guys
give
are.
me, give me just that stout, Rob Burnett. Give me that guy.
I
Give me
mean,
that Mike Flynn. Give me a guy that's just here a couple of 5, 6 years and pretty good. You know what I mean?
But the point I was trying to make with Owe, who I'm guessing probably walks. I mean, I don't know if he has 15 sacks and suddenly looks like Terrell Suggs, and we'll have a different discussion about it. But it's why it's important for any of the circumstances surrounding him being drafted aside, that Mike Green looks the part of, hey, we're going to let Owe go because Mike Green's entering year 2 and he had 7 sacks as a rookie and looked really promising. You want to see that. So there's always that cycle, right? I mean, the best teams sustain. I mean, the Eagles, my gosh, they've drafted well. The Ravens, my goodness, they draft well. I mean, these teams that find, for as much as the Rams, bleep those picks was their big thing. Go look at some of the players they drafted in the middle round. I mean, Puka Nacua, he's one of the best wide receivers in football. Go look when he was drafted. I mean, he wasn't a first or even a second or a third round pick. So you find those gems, and then that makes an older player that you can't afford expendable, but it keeps your talent pipeline fresh. And that's how you manage a roster with a 50 or $60 million quarterback, right? I mean, that's how you manage it. You're going to pay your X number of guys, your true core players, and then you're going to let your good and decent players go, and you're going to draft new good and decent players. Then a couple of those good ones become your new core players, and then a couple of those core players kind of test out. They don't test out, but their contract, you move on from them. So that's how this works. I mean, it's a churn. I mean, it is, especially in football. I mean, baseball, yeah, you might have guys that play 15 years. The guys in the NFL who do that are very few and far between. So it's kind of your first contract guys, your second contract guys. You might have a couple third contract guys, but you're cycling them in. So yeah, this is a big year. Yes, for those veteran players you mentioned, but it's a big year for Nate Wiggins, to show that he can be a guy that you're going to want to pay a couple years from now, because a couple years from now, you're not going to have Marlon Humphrey anymore, presumably. So it's kind of how it works. So they've done a great job managing that. When they have done that, I mean, that's when they've been able to sustain success for several years at a time, and not really going through these down periods and these lulls that so many franchises experience.
Well, you make yourself, if Odafe always steps up and Mike Green doesn't, or if Mike Green steps up. But like, I think about Matt Judon, I think about Paul Kruger, I think about Zadarius Smith, guys that got paid elsewhere doing sort of a similar job. but they never let Suggs get out, right?
Yeah,
Well, got out at the end, Kansas City for 5 minutes,
sure,
but
but not in his prime, right?
but they figured out a way to keep him around. Luke is here. So is Kyle Hamilton, and Luke will be around. We'll be here in the before, during, and after all things Buffalo Bills on Sunday night, all day Sunday, and all week at it here as we are ready for some football. We have our GBMC hotline up and running at this point. Our friends at Curio Wellness have sent me out to eat my favorite foods this month. It's our 27th anniversary. Tastiness is continuing its countdown here this week. There might even be some pit beef and some donuts available this week as well. And I'm happy to have football back. And certainly we've done a lot of baseball here the last 5 months, done a lot of business politics. I did the show from Costas last week. We've had all sorts of political spectrum. We've had business conversations about the state, about the country, about the state of the country, about the state of the state, as well as the state of football. So football's back. We're talking plenty of football around here. What he said, you still do sports, you still do what are you doing? And I'm like, I do whatever we feel like doing and get up and do, but they ain't done nothing in this football team for like 8 months, 9 months, and we knew that the minute the Mark Andrews thing happened, which feels like about 100 years ago. So they cannot kick off soon enough for us to begin this journey of the 2025 NFL season. Bum, 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 bum. He is Luke. I am Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore. We'll see you on the other side of kickoff. Stay with us.